Karen judged a man's clothes. He was undercover DEA. The humid Miami air hung heavy, thick with the scent of salt, exhaust fumes, and something else. Something acrid and underlying, a hint of danger that most tourists, and Karen, blissfully ignored. Karen was on vacation. A meticulously planned, expensively curated vacation designed to showcase her impeccable taste and, more importantly, her social media presence. Her days consisted of lounging by infinity pools and designer swimwear, attending exclusive beach clubs where the champagne flowed like water, and posing for photo shoots against backdrops of turquoise waves and swaying palm trees. Every moment was carefully documented, filtered, and captioned for her ever-growing legion of followers on Coastal Chic. Karen's world was one of appearances. Status was everything. From the label on her sunglasses to the thread count of her hotel sheets, every detail was scrutinized and judged. And she, of course, was the ultimate judge. She considered herself a connoisseur of the finer things, a woman of discerning taste. What she really was, though, was a judgmental snob. It was at a trendy outdoor cafe in South Beach that she first encountered him. He was sitting at a table near the back, away from the sun-drenched posers and preeners who populated the establishment. He wasn't hard to miss, but for all the wrong reasons in Karen's eyes. He was a big man, with a weathered face and calloused hands. He wore faded jeans, a plain t-shirt, and scuffed work boots. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, no carefully sculpted hair. He looked to Karen like a construction worker, or worse. He was talking on a cell phone, his voice low and serious. Even his voice grated on Karen's nerves. It was rough, unpolished, the antithesis of the smooth, mellifluous tones of the men in her social circle. Karen wrinkled her nose, discreetly of course. She wouldn't want to ruin her perfectly contoured smile. She glanced at her immaculately dressed companion, Tiffany, and rolled her eyes slightly. Tiffany, ever attuned to Karen's unspoken judgments, nodded in agreement, her own expression a mask of delicate distaste. "Can you believe that guy?" Karen murmured, loud enough to be heard but disguised as a general comment to Tiffany. "At this cafe, it's like he doesn't even know where he is." Tiffany giggled, a tinkling, insincere sound. "Seriously, it's like he crawled out of a swamp." They both laughed, their eyes flitting back to the man at the back table. He was still on the phone, his conversation seemingly intense. He wasn't paying them any attention, thank God. Karen, emboldened by Tiffany's agreement and the general air of superficiality that permeated the cafe, continued her commentary. "I bet he's a drug dealer or something. He totally looks like one." Tiffany gasped, her eyes widening dramatically. "OMG, Karen, you're right. He does. Maybe we should tell someone." Karen smirked. "Nah, let's just enjoy the show. It's more entertaining this way." They spent the next half hour or so surreptitiously observing the man, whispering snide remarks and inventing increasingly outlandish scenarios about his life and supposed criminal activities. They were like a pair of mean girls in a high school cafeteria, only the cafeteria was a high-end cafe in Miami Beach, and their target was a man who couldn't have cared less about their existence. What Karen and Tiffany didn't know, couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the man they were so casually dismissing was Special Agent Jack Rourke of the DEA. He was deep undercover, working on a complex operation that had been months in the making. The faded jeans and work boots were part of his cover, a carefully constructed disguise that allowed him to blend in with the very people he was trying to bring down. The drug dealer they had so glibly conjured up was actually one of the most dedicated and effective agents in the Bureau. A man with a long and distinguished career of taking down some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Jack Rourke wasn't paying attention to Karen and Tiffany because he was focused on his job. He was in the middle of a delicate negotiation, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse that required all of his attention and skill. He couldn't afford to be distracted by the vapid chatter of a couple of privileged tourists. The operation culminated a few days later in a dramatic takedown at a nearby marina. There were flashing lights, screeching tires, and a whole lot of shouting. Karen and Tiffany, who happened to be at a nearby beach club, of course, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of excitement and fear. "OMG, what's going on?" Tiffany squealed, clutching her designer handbag. "Is it a movie shoot?" Karen, ever the expert on all things, scoffed. Please, Tiffany, this is Miami. It's probably just some riffraff. As the dust settled, they saw several men in handcuffs being led away by heavily armed officers. And then they saw him, the man from the cafe, Agent Jack Rourke. He was no longer in his construction worker disguise. He was wearing a tactical vest with DEA emblazoned across the front. He looked impressive, authoritative, like a man you didn't want to mess with. Karen and Tiffany stared, their mouths agape. The realization of who he was, what he did, and how wrong they had been crashed down upon them like a tidal wave. That's him, Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling. The guy from the cafe. Karen felt a flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. She suddenly remembered all the things she had said, all the judgments she had made, all the laughter at his expense. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the pristine white sand and never be seen again. Jack Rourke, his face grim and focused, walked past them, leading one of the handcuffed men. He didn't even glance in their direction. To him, they were nothing, insignificant. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on the other bystanders. Several of them, who had overheard Karen and Tiffany's earlier comments, shot them disapproving looks. A few even snickered. Karen and Tiffany, for once, were speechless. They gathered their things, their faces burning with shame, and slunk away from the beach club, their perfect vacation suddenly and irrevocably tarnished. The experience haunted Karen long after she left Miami. She couldn't shake off the memory of Jack Rourke, the way he had looked, the quiet power he exuded, the sheer wrongness of her assumptions. She started to see things differently. She began to question her own values, her own judgments, her own place in the world. She realized how much of her life had been based on superficiality, on appearances, on the shallow pursuit of status and validation. It was a painful realization, a harsh awakening to the truth about herself. But it was also the beginning of a long and difficult journey of change. Karen stopped posting on Coastal Chic. She couldn't bear the thought of perpetuating the image she had so carefully constructed, the image that had been so thoroughly shattered. She started volunteering at a local charity, working with people who came from backgrounds very different from her own. She began to read books, not about fashion and travel, but about social justice, about inequality, about the complexities of the real world. She even tried to reach out to Jack Rourke to apologize for her behavior. She didn't know if he would even remember her, but she felt compelled to try. She sent a letter to the DEA office in Miami, explaining who she was and what she had done. She didn't expect forgiveness, but she hoped he would understand her remorse. To her surprise, she received a response. It wasn't a long letter, but it was kind. Jack Rourke acknowledged her apology, but he also stressed the importance of looking beyond appearances, of seeing the humanity in everyone, regardless of how they dress or where they come from. His words stayed with Karen, becoming a sort of mantra for her as she continued her journey of transformation. She learned to listen more than she spoke, to empathize more than she judged, and to value people for who they were, not for what they had. The change was slow and arduous. Karen had to unlearn years of ingrained thinking, to confront the uncomfortable truths about herself, and to make amends for the harm she had caused. She lost some friends along the way, people who couldn't understand or accept the new Karen. But she persevered. She knew that she had to change, not only for herself, but for the world around her. She had to become the person she had always had the potential to be, a person of compassion, understanding, and genuine connection. Years passed. Karen was no longer the woman of privilege and prejudice, the woman who had lived in a bubble of superficiality. She became a woman of humility and authenticity, a woman who was committed to making the world a more just and equitable place. And it all started with a chance encounter at a cafe in Miami, a misjudgment of a man in faded jeans, and the harsh but necessary lesson that appearances can be deceiving, and that true worth lies beneath the surface.